The rain came down in cold, hard sheets, turning the courtyard of Stonekeep into a pit of deep, black mud. Lyra fell to her knees. The wet dirt soaked right through her thin wool dress, freezing her skin. She grabbed her chest. Her heart felt like it was being squeezed by a giant iron fist. "Get up," Alpha Kalen sneered. He stood over her, his heavy leather boots sinking into the muck. He didn't even try to help her. He just stared down at her like she was a piece of rotting meat. Lyra gasped for air, but her lungs burned. "Kalen, please," she whispered, her voice was shaking. "The bond, it's tearing my chest apart." "Good," he spat. He looked around the courtyard. Hundreds of pack members stood in the rain, watching them. No one stepped forward, no one cared. They just pulled their fur cloaks tighter and glared at her. "Let them all see," Kalen shouted, his voice cutting through the sound of the heavy rain. "Look at her. Look at this weak, pathetic thing the moon goddess tried to tie to me." Lyra coughed and a hot spray of blood hit the mud. The pain in her chest spiked, sharp and hot like a blade. When an alpha rejected his fated mate, it didn't just break her heart. It destroyed her body. The bond was literally ripping her veins open from the inside. "I, Alpha Kalen of the Iron Fang Pack," he roared, "reject you, Lyra. I reject you as my mate, as my Luna, and as a wolf of this pack. You are nothing to me, just a dirty, useless stray." The words hit her like a physical blow. Lyra screamed. She couldn't hold it back. She slammed her hands into the mud and screamed as the magical tie between their souls snapped. It felt like fire pouring down her throat. She collapsed sideways into the cold dirt, shivering violently. Kalen kicked her in the ribs. Hard. "Get her out of my sight," he told his guards. "Throw her in the woods, let the wild bears eat her. If she crawls back, kill her." Lyra is bleeding out in the freezing mud, and her own fated mate just ordered her to be thrown to the wild bears. Before we see if she survives this brutal night, please drop a like on this video if you are enjoying it, as it really helps the algorithm push more warlord stories just like this to your feed. Also, let me know down in the comments where in the world you are watching from today. And listen, if you don't hit that subscribe button right now, you might just be leaving Lyra to die alone in the cold, dark woods while Kalen gets away with his sick, twisted pride. Don't be the reason she loses all hope. Subscribe to Warlords now to save her. Rough hands grabbed Lyra by the arms. Two of Kalen's biggest guards, men who used to smile and say good morning to her, yanked her up from the mud. Her shoulder popped, sending a fresh wave of blinding pain through her body. "Fuck this damn rain," the guard on her left grunted. He smelled like cheap ale and wet dog. "Why do we have to drag this dead weight all the way to the tree line? She's basically a corpse already." "Just shut up and walk," the other guard snapped. "Alpha wants her out of the territory. If we don't dump her past the markers, he'll have our heads on spikes." They dragged her across the courtyard. Her bare feet scraped against the rough cobblestones, tearing the skin off her toes. She didn't have the strength to fight them. She couldn't even lift her head. Every breath she took sounded like wet paper tearing inside her chest. The rejection sickness was working fast. Her vision was getting blurry, dark around the edges. The heavy wooden gates of Stonekeep groaned open. The guards pulled her out into the dark, thick forest. The mud out here was even worse. They slipped and cursed, practically dropping her every few steps. "This is far enough," the first guard panted. "The ravine is right there, toss her down." They didn't even give her a second to brace herself. They just swung her body back and threw her. Lyra fell through the dark, empty air. She hit the steep, muddy side of the ravine and rolled. Branches whipped her face, cutting her cheeks. Rocks smashed into her ribs and her legs. She tumbled over and over until she slammed stomach first into the thick trunk of a dead oak tree at the bottom. A sick crack echoed in the night. One of her ribs broke. Lyra lay there in the cold mud, staring up at the rain falling through the dark leaves. Far above, she heard the guards laughing. "Good riddance, you weak bitch," one of them yelled down. Then their heavy footsteps faded away into the storm. She was completely alone. Lyra closed her eyes. The pain was so bad she wanted to vomit, but there was nothing in her stomach. She raised her shaking hand and touched her neck. Even in the dark, her fingers could feel the thick, swollen veins bulging under her skin, the rejection sickness. It was turning her blood black, slowly poisoning her from the inside out. Without a pack, without a mate, a wolf simply wasted away and died. And Kalen had made sure she had neither. "I won't die," she whispered to herself. The words tasted like copper and dirt. "I won't let that piece of shit win." She tried to push herself up. Her arms shook wildly. She got to her hands and knees, but her broken rib flared with bright, blinding agony. She collapsed back into the mud with a harsh cry. It was no use. She was too weak. The cold was sinking into her bones, making her body numb. Maybe it would be better to just close her eyes, just sleep. The freezing rain would take her soon. A low, deep growl cut through the sound of the storm. Lyra froze, her heart hammered against her broken ribs. That wasn't the sound of a normal wolf, that was the sound of a monster. She slowly turned her head. Through the heavy curtain of rain, a massive shadow stepped out from the trees. It was a wolf, but it was easily twice the size of Kaelin's biggest fighters. Its fur was pitch black, blending into the night, but its eyes glowed a bright, terrifying silver. The beast took a slow, heavy step toward her. Its giant paws didn't even make a sound in the mud. Lyra tried to scramble backward, but her body just wouldn't obey. "Stay back," she choked out. Just end it fast, please." The giant wolf didn't attack. Instead, it stopped right in front of her. The silver eyes stared down at her broken, bleeding body. Then the beast shifted. The sound of cracking bones and shifting muscle filled the air, loud and violent. In a matter of seconds, the giant wolf was gone, replaced by a man. He was huge, standing well over 6 feet tall. Rain poured over his broad shoulders and ran down his scarred chest. He wore thick, dark leather pants and a heavy fur pelt draped over one shoulder, pinned with a rusted iron clasp. A massive broadsword hung at his hip. He crouched down next to her. His face was rugged and hard, covered in thick scruff and angry, faded scars. But his eyes, they were still that piercing, glowing silver. He leaned in close and sniffed the air right next to her neck. Lyra flinched, squeezing her eyes shut. "Ironfang stench," the man said. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "And the smell of rotting blood, a broken bond." Lyra opened her eyes. "Who are you?" she whispered. "My name is Lucian," he said coldly, "Alpha of the Blood Moon Sanctuary." Lyra felt a spike of pure terror. Blood Moon, they were the sworn enemies of the Ironfang pack. Kaelin always told stories about them. He said they were savages, monsters who drank the blood of their enemies and took whatever they wanted. If Lucian knew she was an Ironfang wolf, he would probably tear her throat out right here. "Kill me then," Lyra spat. She didn't know where the anger came from, but suddenly she was tired of being scared. She was tired of being a victim. "Just get it over with, I don't give a damn anymore." Lucian raised an eyebrow. The hard lines of his face shifted slightly. He reached out with a massive, calloused hand. Lyra braced for a strike, but instead his fingers gently brushed the wet, dirty hair out of her eyes. His touch was surprisingly warm against her freezing skin. "You smell like death, little wolf," Lucian murmured. He looked closely at the black veins creeping up her neck. "Your alpha discarded you, left you to rot in the mud." "He's not my alpha anymore," Lyra said fiercely, though her voice was barely a squeak. "I belong to no one." Lucian stared at her for a long, silent moment. The rain hammered against his broad back, but he didn't seem to notice the cold. He looked at her broken rib, her bleeding feet, and the fierce, angry fire burning in her dull eyes. "You are dying," Lucian stated. "The bond sickness will stop your heart before the sun comes up." "I know," she whispered, the fight suddenly draining out of her. The pain was getting worse. The darkness at the edges of her vision was closing in. "If I leave you here, you die," Lucian continued, his voice perfectly calm. "If I take you back to my lands, my people will want to rip you apart for carrying the Ironfang scent." "Then leave me," Lyra groaned, pressing her face back into the mud. "I'm not begging a Blood Moon dog for my life." A low, dark chuckle rumbled in Lucian's chest. "A dead woman with a sharp tongue, I like that." He suddenly stood up. He reached down and grabbed her by the waist. With one effortless pull, he hauled her up off the ground. Lyra screamed as her broken rib shifted. "Fuck, put me down, let me go." "Shut up and hold still," Lucian ordered. He didn't drop her. Instead, he adjusted his grip and hoisted her up into his arms, carrying her against his chest like she weighed absolutely nothing. The heat coming off his body was incredible. It sank right through her wet clothes, pushing back the freezing cold. "Why are you doing this?" Lyra gasped, struggling weakly against his massive arms. "I'm your enemy." "You were my enemy when you belonged to Kaelin," Lucian said, his jaw tight as he started walking up the steep side of the ravine. His heavy boots dug deep into the mud, carrying them both easily. "Now you are just a stray, and I run a sanctuary for strays." "I'm sick," she argued, coughing up another speck of blood that landed on his bare chest. "The sickness, it's going to kill me. You can't fix a broken mate bond." Lucian looked down at her. His silver eyes flashed in the dark. I don't plan on fixing Kalen's mistakes. I plan on making him regret them. You are going to live, little wolf, and when you are strong enough, we are going to make that arrogant bastard choke on his own pride. Lyra wanted to ask him how. She wanted to ask him why he cared. But the warmth of his body and the steady, slow beating of his heart were too much. The exhaustion finally hit her like a brick wall. Her head fell against his thick shoulder, and the dark, rainy forest faded away into completely black silence. When Lyra finally opened her eyes again, the rain was gone. The smell of wet mud and rotting leaves had been replaced by the scent of burning pine wood and roasting meat. She blinked, trying to clear the fuzzy darkness from her vision. She was lying on a massive bed covered in thick brown bear furs. The room was huge, built from heavy grey stone and dark wood. A massive fire roared in a stone hearth across the room, throwing warm orange light over the walls. There were no glass windows, just heavy wooden shutters that were barred shut against the wind. Lyra tried to sit up, but a sharp, burning pain shot through her chest. She gasped and fell back onto the furs. "Don't move," a rough voice commanded. Lyra turned her head. A woman was sitting in a wooden chair near the fire. She looked to be in her 50s, with greying hair pulled back into a tight braid and deep wrinkles around her eyes. She wore a simple brown linen dress stained with dried herbs. "Where am I?" Lyra asked. Her throat felt like it was coated in sand. "You are in the Blood Moon stronghold," the old woman said. She stood up and walked over to the bed, holding a clay cup. "Drink this. It tastes like horse piss, but it will help the pain." Lyra weakly pushed herself up on one elbow. The woman held the cup to her lips. It was a hot, bitter tea that made Lyra gag, but she forced it down. "I am Ilara," the woman said, setting the cup down on a small wooden table. "I am the pack healer. Alpha Lucian brought you in 3 days ago." Lyra's eyes went wide. 3 days. "You were half dead," Ilara snorted. "Honestly, you should be fully dead. The mate's sickness had reached your heart. Your veins were black as coal when he carried you through the gates. The whole pack thought he brought a corpse into the keep." Lyra looked down at her hands. The black, bulging veins were gone. Her skin was pale, but it looked normal. She touched her chest. The crushing, squeezing agony of the broken bond was still there, a dull ache in the background, but the sharp, killing fire was gone. "How?" Lyra whispered. "You can't cure a rejected bond." Ilara crossed her arms and looked at Lyra closely. "No, you can't, but you aren't just a normal wolf, are you, girl?" Lyra frowned, confused. "What do you mean, I'm just a normal wolf? I don't even have a strong shift. Kalen said I was useless." Ilara let out a harsh, barking laugh. "Kalen is a blind, arrogant fool. When I cut your dress off to bind your broken rib, I saw the mark on your back. The old mark. The one that hasn't been seen in these lands for over 200 years. Lyra reached around to her own back, feeling between her shoulder blades. There was a birthmark there, a weird, jagged shape she had carried since she was a baby. The Iron Fang pack always made fun of her for it, calling it an ugly stain. "It's just a birthmark," Lyra said defensively. "It is the crest of the First Elders," Ilara said, her voice dropping low. "It means your bloodline is ancient, girl, older than the Iron Fangs, older than the Blood Moons. Your blood fought the rejection sickness. It forced your body into a deep sleep to heal itself. Anyone else would have rotted in the mud that first night, but your blood refused to die." Before Lyra could process any of that, the heavy wooden door to the room slammed open. Lucian walked in. He ducked slightly to clear the doorframe. He was wearing a simple grey tunic that pulled tight across his massive chest, and dark leather pants tucked into heavy boots. His silver eyes locked right onto Lyra. "Leave us, Ilara," Lucian ordered. The old healer bowed her head slightly. "Yes, Alpha." She hurried out of the room, shutting the heavy door behind her. Lucian walked slowly toward the bed. He stopped at the foot of it, crossing his huge arms over his chest. He looked at her like a predator studying a trapped rabbit. "You slept for a long time," Lucian said. "Ilara said you brought me here," Lyra said. She pulled the thick bare furs up to her chin, suddenly feeling very exposed. "Why didn't you just let me die? You know Kalen will start a war if he finds out you took me." Lucian let out a dark chuckle. "I welcome a war with that coward, but that is not why I saved you." He leaned forward, resting his large hands on the wooden footboard of the bed. "Ilara told me about the mark on your back, the elder bloodline." Lyra shook her head. "I don't know what she's talking about. I'm weak. I can barely even shift." "You are weak because you were raised by sheep who didn't know how to feed a dragon," Lucian said harshly. The Iron Fang pack suppresses their wolves. They force them to be small so the alpha can feel big. Your wolf isn't weak, Lyra. It's starved. It's been locked in a cage inside your mind for your entire life. Lyra stared at him. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever told her she could be strong. They only ever told her to keep her head down, to serve the higher-ranking wolves, to be quiet. "What do you want from me?" she asked. Her voice shook, but she forced herself to look right into his glowing silver eyes. "I want to make a deal with you," Lucian said. He walked around the side of the bed and sat down in the wooden chair Ilara had just left. The wood groaned under his massive weight. "You have no pack. You have no mate. Under the old laws of the territory, you are a rogue. Any wolf can kill you on sight without consequence." Lyra swallowed hard. "I know." "Stay here," Lucian said. "Stay in the Blood Moon Sanctuary. I will give you food, shelter, and protection. No one in my pack will touch you, and in return you will let me train you. You will let me break that cage inside your mind and bring your true wolf out." "Why?" Lyra asked, narrowing her eyes. "Nobody does something for nothing, especially not an alpha. What do you get out of this?" Lucian smiled. It was a dangerous, wicked smile that showed off a flash of sharp white teeth. Because when Kaelin finds out the pathetic, broken mate he threw into the mud has become the most powerful wolf in the region, it will break his miserable, prideful mind. And then, I am going to watch you tear his throat out. Lyra's breath hitched, the thought of killing Kaelin, of making him feel the pain and humiliation he had put her through. It sent a dark, hot thrill straight to her chest. "Do we have a deal, little wolf?" Lucian asked, holding out his massive, scarred hand. Lyra looked at his hand, then she looked at his face. He wasn't lying to her. He didn't want to use her like a servant. He wanted to use her like a weapon. And right now, being a weapon sounded a hell of a lot better than being a victim. She reached out from under the furs and placed her small, pale hand inside his massive grip. "Deal," she whispered. The heavy oak door clicked shut, leaving Lyra alone in the massive stone room. She stared at her hand. Her fingers were still tingling from Lucian's grip. He was massive, dangerous, and completely out of his mind. But he was right. Kaelin had thrown her away like trash. If she wanted to live, if she wanted revenge, she had to play Lucian's game. She pushed the heavy bare furs off her legs. The cold air in the room hit her bare skin, making her shiver violently. She slowly swung her legs over the edge of the bed. Her bare feet touched the freezing stone floor. "Okay," she whispered to herself, "just stand up." She put her weight on her legs and pushed. Her knees instantly buckled. A sharp, hot pain stabbed through her broken rib. Lyra collapsed onto the hard stone floor with a loud thud. She cursed, grabbing her side. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them away. Crying wouldn't fix her ribs. Crying wouldn't make her stronger. The door creaked open. Ilara walked in carrying a wooden tray. The old healer looked down at Lyra on the floor and sighed loudly. "I told you not to move, you foolish girl," Ilara grumbled. She set the tray on the small table and walked over. She didn't offer a hand. She just stood there looking down. "If you want to walk, you have to eat first. Your body used up everything it had just to keep your heart beating. You are completely empty." Lyra gritted her teeth. She planted her hands on the cold stone and forced herself back up. Her arms shook wildly. It took her 3 tries, but she finally managed to drag herself back onto the edge of the bed. She was panting hard, cold sweat breaking out on her forehead. "Give me the food," Lyra breathed out. Ilara handed her a thick wooden bowl. It was filled with a thick grey stew that smelled like old fat and root vegetables. It looked absolutely disgusting. Lyra didn't care. She grabbed the wooden spoon and shoved a large bite into her mouth. It tasted like dirt and cheap salt, but her stomach roared for it. She ate it as fast as she could, practically swallowing it whole without chewing. "Slow down or you will puke it right back up," Ilara warned, crossing her arms over her chest. Lyra ignored her and scraped the bottom of the bowl clean. She set it down and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "When do I start training?" she asked. Ilara laughed. It was a dry, scratching sound like dry leaves rubbing together. "Training? Girl, you can barely stand up without falling on your face. Alpha Lucian is a hard man. He does not go easy on anyone. If he puts you in the training ring right now, he will break your neck by accident." "He made a deal with me," Lyra said stubbornly. "I am not going to sit in this bed and wait." "You will do exactly what your alpha tells you to do," Ilara snapped. "He is not my alpha," Lyra shot back angrily. "I don't have an alpha." Ilara leaned in close. Her dark eyes were hard and completely serious. Listen to me, Stray. You are in Blood Moon territory now. Out there in the courtyard there are 200 wolves who would love to tear your throat out just for smelling like an iron fang. The only reason you are breathing right now is because Lucian claimed you as his personal project. Around here, his word is the only law. If you disrespect him, he will let the pack have you. Do you understand? Lyra swallowed hard. The hot anger in her chest faded, replaced by cold reality. She nodded slowly. I understand. Good, Ilara said, stepping back. She reached into a large leather pouch on her belt and pulled out a plain, dark grey dress made of rough wool. She threw it onto the bed. Put that on. Your old dress was covered in mud and blood. I threw it in the fire. When you are dressed, come outside. The Alpha wants to see you. Lyra spent 10 long minutes just putting the simple dress on. Raising her arms made her broken rib scream in protest. The wool was itchy and stiff, rubbing harshly against her sensitive skin. She didn't have any shoes, so she had to walk barefoot. She slowly pushed the heavy oak door open and stepped out into the dark hallway. The Blood Moon stronghold was massive. The walls were made of huge dark grey stones, damp with the freezing cold air. Torches burned in iron brackets every few feet, casting long, dancing shadows on the floor. The place smelled strongly of wood smoke, wet fur and roasted meat. It was very loud, too. She could hear people shouting, heavy boots stomping on stone, and the distant clashing of metal swords. Lyra walked slowly down the hallway, keeping one hand flat against the cold stone wall for balance. Every step sent a fresh jolt of pain up her legs. She reached a wide set of stone stairs and carefully made her way down. At the bottom of the stairs, a heavy wooden door led outside. Lyra pushed it open and squinted her eyes against the bright grey light. The sky was a dull, heavy grey. The rain had finally stopped, but a freezing, biting wind swept through the courtyard. The ground was a terrible mess of deep, churned-up black mud and dirty, melting snow. The courtyard was huge, surrounded by high stone walls topped with sharp iron spikes. Dozens of wolves were everywhere. They were chopping heavy logs of wood, carrying large barrels of ale and sharpening long swords on grinding stones. They all stopped what they were doing the exact moment Lyra stepped outside. A thick, heavy silence fell over the courtyard. Every single pair of eyes locked right onto her. Lyra froze in place. Her heart started to beat way too fast. These people looked nothing like the clean, polished, well-fed wolves of the Iron Fang pack. These people were extremely rough. They wore thick animal furs and dirty dark leathers. Many of them had deep, angry scars on their faces and arms. They looked hungry, mean, and very dangerous. A huge man with a thick black beard dropped the heavy axe he was holding. He took a slow step toward her. He tilted his head back and sniffed the cold winter air. His upper lip curled back in disgust, showing long, yellow teeth. Iron Fang, the man growled. His voice was low, but every single person heard it clearly. Several other wolves took a step forward. A low, threatening rumble started to echo all around the courtyard. It was the terrifying sound of a wolf pack getting ready to kill. Lyra backed up slowly, hitting the heavy wooden door behind her. She had nowhere to run. She tried to call her inner wolf forward to prepare for a fight, but there was absolutely nothing there. Just an empty, hollow ache in her chest. She was completely helpless. Back to work, a booming voice thundered across the muddy courtyard. The low growling instantly stopped. The wolves all lowered their heads fast and took a step back. Lucian stood on a raised wooden platform right at the center of the courtyard. He held a massive wooden practice sword in his right hand. He was shirtless, completely ignoring the freezing wind, and his massive chest and thick arms were covered in sweat and dark dirt. He pointed the wooden sword directly at the man with the black beard. "Taurin," Lucian said coldly, "if you ever look at my guest like that again, I will rip your eyes out and feed them to the crows. Pick up your damn axe." Taurin swallowed hard, keeping his head pointed at the mud. "Yes, Alpha." He quickly grabbed his heavy axe and went right back to chopping wood. The rest of the pack immediately went back to their jobs. They didn't dare look at Lyra again. It was like she was completely invisible to them now. Lucian jumped down from the tall wooden platform. He landed in the deep mud with a heavy, wet splash, but he didn't seem to care at all. He walked straight over to Lyra. He looked down at her small, bare feet, shivering in the freezing mud, and then up at her pale, scared face. "You look like shit," Lucian said bluntly. "Good morning to you too," Lyra muttered, crossing her arms tight against her chest to try and keep warm. Lucian let out a short, rough laugh. "Ilara told me you were awake. She also told me you couldn't even stand up without falling over. I'm standing now, Lyra said defensively, lifting her chin. Barely, Lucian pointed out. He walked past her and gestured roughly with his hand. Come with me, it is time to see exactly what we are working with. He didn't wait a single second to see if she followed. He just started walking fast across the muddy courtyard. Lyra let out a highly frustrated breath and followed him. She had to walk very fast to keep up with his long, heavy strides, which made her broken rib throb violently with every single step. Lucian led her behind the main stone keep, to a smaller enclosed area. It was a fighting ring. The ground was covered in thick, dark dirt instead of mud, and a low wooden fence completely surrounded it. A rack of brutal-looking iron weapons sat in the far corner. Get in the ring, Lucian ordered. He tossed his wooden practice sword to the side of the fence. Lyra stopped right at the edge of the fence. What? You just said I look like shit, I have a broken rib, I can barely walk, I'm not fighting you. Lucian turned around slowly. His glowing silver eyes were hard and completely unforgiving. Did I ask you to fight me? I told you to get in the ring. Lyra gritted her teeth in pure anger. She grabbed the top of the rough wooden fence and carefully climbed over, dropping down into the soft dirt on the other side. The very moment her bare feet touched the ground, Lucian moved. He was impossibly fast for a man his massive size. 1 second he was 10 feet away, and the very next second he was right in front of her. He shoved her incredibly hard in the chest with both hands. Lyra flew backward through the air. She hit the hard dirt back first, knocking all the wind completely out of her lungs. The pain in her broken rib exploded like a bomb. She gasped loudly, curling into a tight, shaking ball on the dirty ground. Fuck, she screamed. Get up, Lucian said. He didn't sound angry at all. He sounded totally bored. Lyra struggled hard to pull air back into her empty lungs. She rolled slowly onto her hands and knees, spitting out a big mouthful of dirty brown dirt. You're fucking crazy, she choked out. You're going to kill me. If pushing you over kills you, then you were already dead, Lucian replied coldly. He walked over and stood right above her shaking body. Shift. Lyra looked up at him, totally confused. What? Shift into your wolf, Lucian commanded loudly. Now. I can't, Lyra said, wiping wet mud off her face with a shaking hand. I told you my wolf is completely weak, and I'm badly hurt. You can't force a shift when your human body is broken. It will tear my muscles apart from the inside. Lucian reached down fast and grabbed a huge handful of her rough wool dress. He hauled her right up to her feet. He pulled her so incredibly close that she could feel the intense heat radiating off his bare, sweaty chest. You are an Iron Fang, he growled right in her face, spitting a little. You were taught to fear pain. You were taught that pain means stop. I am going to teach you the actual truth. He let go of her dress entirely and slapped her right across the face, extremely hard. The loud crack echoed across the empty training yard. Lyra stumbled backward fast, her hand flying up to her burning, stinging cheek. She instantly tasted fresh, hot blood in her mouth where her teeth had cut the inside of her lip. She stared at him, completely and totally shocked. Pain does not mean stop, Lucian said, his voice deadly serious and very low. Pain is fuel. It makes you angry, it makes you extremely dangerous. Shift. I can't, Lyra screamed back at him, hot tears of pure frustration finally spilling down her dirty face. She hated this. She hated him so much. She hated feeling so small and pathetic and weak. Lucian lunged forward again and grabbed her hard by the shoulders. He slammed her back roughly against the wooden fence. The heavy wood groaned loudly under their combined weight. You want Kalen to pay, he shouted directly into her ear. You want to make him choke on his own damn blood, then stop acting like a scared little rabbit, call the wolf out. He shoved her again, throwing her face first right into the middle of the dirt ring. Lyra hit the ground incredibly hard, her mouth filled with dirty, metallic-tasting dirt again. Her whole body was shaking uncontrollably. She was freezing cold, completely starving and in absolute agony. But underneath all the terrible pain, something else was finally starting to burn. It was a tiny, hot spark deep in the center of her chest. It didn't feel at all like the soft, quiet, weak wolf she was entirely used to. It felt very heavy. It felt incredibly ancient. He left you to rot in the mud, Lucian taunted loudly from the edge of the ring. He paced back and forth, watching her struggle in the dirt. He laughed out loud while his guards threw you away. He told them to let the wild bears eat you alive. He probably already has another beautiful female in his bed right now, a real, strong Luna, not a weak, broken stray like you. The cruel words hit Lyra like heavy rocks. She saw Kaelin's handsome face perfectly in her mind. She saw his cruel, mocking smile as he rejected her in front of the entire pack. She heard the guards laughing loudly as they threw her down the dark ravine. The tiny spark in her chest suddenly flared right into a massive, roaring fire. It hurt so much worse than the broken rib, worse than the terrible rejection sickness. It felt exactly like her bones were melting into hot liquid. Lyra let out a loud scream, but it didn't sound human at all. It sounded like two heavy, giant stones grinding together. She pushed herself up onto her hands and knees. The muscles in her thin arms started to bulge and shift violently under her skin. Her human fingernails cracked loudly and lengthened rapidly, turning into thick, sharp black claws that dug deep into the hard dirt. Lucien stopped pacing immediately. He stood perfectly still, watching her closely. His glowing silver eyes were wide open in shock. Lyra squeezed her eyes tightly shut as her human jaw pushed forward, breaking and reforming with loud, wet snaps. Thick, blindingly silver-white fur burst violently from her pale skin, tearing right through the long sleeves of her rough wool dress. The intense heat inside her was completely incredible. It instantly burned away the terrible cold, and burned away the sharp pain of her broken rib entirely. She threw her massive head back and let out a deafening, terrifying roar. When she finally opened her eyes, her vision was completely different. Everything was incredibly sharper, completely brighter. She could see the tiny, tiny veins in the dead leaves on the trees way past the stone wall. She could smell the salty sweat on Lucien's skin, the metallic tang of his iron sword nearby, and the deep, earthy smell of the dirt directly beneath her massive front paws. She looked down at herself quickly. She was absolutely huge. She wasn't the small, pathetic, light brown wolf she used to be back at Ironfang. Her paws were completely massive, her legs thick with incredibly heavy muscle. Her long fur was a blinding, pure silver-white color. She slowly turned her large head and looked right at Lucien. He was staring directly at her, an expression of pure, unhidden awe on his rough, scarred face. He didn't look mean or angry anymore. He looked like he had just seen a real ghost. Lyra let out a low, terrifyingly deep rumbling growl that shook her own massive chest. She took one heavy step toward him. She wanted to test this incredible new power. She desperately wanted to tear something completely apart. Lucien didn't back away an inch. He stood his ground bravely and raised his large hands very slowly. "Easy," he said, his rough voice deep and very calm. "Easy, little wolf, you finally found her. Now you have to try to control her." Lyra snapped her massive jaws loudly, the sound exactly like a heavy steel trap closing fast. She deeply wanted to attack. Her hot blood was pumping so incredibly fast she felt dizzy. The ancient, wild wolf inside her mind was screaming loudly for violence, begging to sink its sharp teeth directly into hot flesh. She took another heavy, threatening step toward Lucien. The dirt crunched loudly under her huge, sharp claws. "Lyra," Lucien said, his voice instantly turning into a harsh, demanding command. "Stand down right now. If you attack me right now, I will absolutely not hold back, and you do not know how to correctly use that massive body yet." She stopped. The human part of her mind, the part that was still very terrified and exhausted, fought incredibly hard against the wild, ancient instincts of the massive wolf. It was a brutal, exhausting mental tug-of-war. Her massive, furry chest heaved up and down quickly as she panted hard. Slowly, the burning, hot fire in her veins started to finally cool down. The pure exhaustion crashed entirely into her like a falling tree hitting the ground. The silver-white fur began to recede quickly. Her bones snapped and cracked loudly as they shrank rapidly back into their normal human shapes. The shift back was incredibly fast and very violent. Lyra collapsed completely into the dirt, entirely naked, her human body covered in cold sweat and dark mud. She couldn't move a single muscle if she tried. Lucien walked over quickly and dropped down to one knee right beside her. He reached out and placed a large, very warm hand on her bare, freezing shoulder. "You actually did it," he said very quietly. Lyra couldn't speak at all. She just lay there in the dirt, staring up at the grey sky, struggling hard to pull air into her lungs. Lucien unclasped the heavy, warm fur pelt from his own broad shoulder and draped it carefully over her shivering, naked body. He effortlessly scooped her up into his massive arms, holding her tightly against his warm chest. "The elder blood is completely real," Lucian muttered quietly to himself, looking down at her pale, totally exhausted face. A dark, very dangerous smile slowly spread across his lips. Kaelin has absolutely no idea what he just threw away. Lyra woke up to the heavy smell of roasting pork and burning pine wood. She opened her eyes slowly. The heavy darkness in the room was pushed back by a massive fire roaring in the stone hearth. She was back in the large bed, buried deep under the thick bare furs. For a long minute, she just lay there, waiting for the terrible pain in her chest to start. She waited for her broken rib to stab her lungs. She waited for the cold, dark poison of Kaelin's rejection to make her choke. Nothing happened. Lyra sat up fast. She grabbed her own chest. The dull, heavy ache of the broken mate bond was still there, sitting right at the bottom of her heart like a cold stone. But the sharp, killing fire was completely gone. She ran her hands down her sides. Her rib wasn't broken anymore. The skin was smooth and totally whole. She pushed the furs off and swung her legs out of the bed. Her bare feet hit the stone floor, and this time her knees didn't shake. She didn't feel weak at all. Actually, she felt like she could pick up the heavy oak door and throw it across the room. Her blood was pumping fast and hot through her veins. She felt incredibly hungry. A deep, hollow starvation tore at her stomach, making it growl loudly in the quiet room. The door opened, and Elara walked in carrying a stack of folded clothes. The old healer stopped and stared at Lyra sitting on the edge of the bed. "You healed," Elara said. Her rough voice was quiet, full of complete disbelief. "In less than 4 hours, a fully crushed rib and torn muscles, totally healed." "I'm starving," Lyra said. Her own voice sounded different to her. It was deeper, rougher. It didn't sound like the scared little girl from the Ironfang pack anymore. Elara slowly walked over and dropped the clothes on the end of the bed. "The Alpha said you shifted. He said you turned into a monster right in the middle of the training ring." The old woman looked at Lyra like she was a ticking bomb. "He said you are an elder wolf." "I don't even know what that really means," Lyra muttered. She grabbed the clothes. It wasn't an itchy wool dress this time. It was a pair of thick, dark leather pants, a soft grey linen shirt, and a heavy black fur vest. There was also a pair of sturdy leather boots. "It means you are dangerous," Elara said bluntly. "The elder wolves were the first ones. The biggest, the most violent. They didn't bow to anyone. They ruled the entire continent a long time ago. Everyone thought that bloodline died out completely, but somehow it survived in you." Lyra pulled the leather pants on. They fit perfectly, hugging her legs tight. She pulled the soft shirt over her head and laced up the heavy boots. She felt strong. She felt grounded. "Where is Lucian?" "He is in the Great Hall," Elara said, taking a step back as Lyra stood up. "The whole pack is eating. He told me to bring you down the second you woke up." "Good," Lyra said, walking right past the old healer. "Because if I don't get some real food right now, I might just eat someone." She didn't wait for Elara to lead the way. Her nose did all the work. The smell of roasted meat, spilled ale, and hundreds of wolves led her straight down the long, torchlit stone hallways. The noise got louder and louder with every step. Shouting, deep laughter, the slamming of wooden cups on heavy tables. Lyra reached a massive set of double wooden doors at the end of the hall. 2 huge guards holding iron spears stood on either side. They looked at her, their eyes going wide for a second, but they didn't say a word. They grabbed the heavy iron handles and pulled the doors open for her. The great hall was completely massive. High ceilings completely hidden by thick wood smoke, 4 giant stone fireplaces roaring with heat, and 4 long wooden tables packed with hundreds of blood moon wolves. The noise was deafening. They were eating like starved animals, tearing meat off bones with their hands, pouring cheap brown ale down their throats, and arguing loudly. Lyra took 1 step inside the hall, and the exact same thing happened as before. The entire room went completely dead silent. Hundreds of heads turned to look at her, but this time they didn't look at her with disgust. They didn't growl. They stared at her with wide eyes, and she could smell their fear. The sharp, sour scent of their fear mixed heavily with the smell of the roasting pork. They could smell it on her. Her scent had changed. She didn't just smell like a weak Ironfang stray anymore. The ancient, wild magic of the massive silver wolf was bleeding right through her human skin, filling the entire room with a heavy, terrifying pressure. Lucian sat at the very end of the room at a raised table. He was sitting in a massive wooden chair covered in black wolf pelts. He was holding a large silver cup of ale. When he saw her standing in the doorway, a slow, dark smile spread across his scarred face. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. He just raised his hand and pointed to the empty wooden chair sitting right next to him. Lyra kept her chin up. She walked straight down the middle of the hall between the long tables. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. The massive wolves pulled their arms back to let her pass, keeping their heads lowered slightly. It was a sign of deep respect, a sign of submission. She reached the raised table and sat down in the heavy wooden chair next to Lucien. Lucien picked up a massive iron platter sitting in front of him. It was piled high with huge chunks of roasted pork dripping with hot grease, burned perfectly on the edges. He set the entire platter directly in front of Lyra. "Eat," he commanded softly. Lyra didn't care about manners. She didn't care about looking like a lady. Kaelin had always forced her to eat tiny portions with a silver fork, telling her she needed to stay small and pretty. Fuck Kaelin, fuck all of that. She reached out with her bare hands, grabbed a massive chunk of hot meat and took a huge bite. The hot grease ran down her chin and dripped onto her soft grey shirt. It was the best thing she had ever tasted in her entire life. Her ancient wolf purred loudly in the back of her mind, completely satisfied by the rich, heavy food. She ate extremely fast, tearing the meat apart with her teeth, not stopping to breathe. Lucien leaned back in his chair and watched her. He looked highly entertained. "You eat like a wild dog," he noted, taking a slow drink of his ale. "I'm starving," Lyra said with her mouth completely full. She grabbed a wooden cup filled with water and chugged the entire thing in 2 seconds. She slammed the cup back down on the hard wood. "Shifting takes everything out of you." "Yes, it does," Lucien agreed. He looked out over the quiet, staring pack. "Get back to your food," he suddenly roared. The spell broke instantly. The pack jumped slightly, and then the loud talking, laughing, and eating started right back up. But Lyra noticed that the wolves sitting closest to their table kept throwing nervous looks in her direction. "They are scared of me," Lyra said, wiping the hot grease off her mouth with the back of her hand. "They are terrified of you," Lucien corrected her. He leaned closer to her. His massive shoulder brushed against hers. His body heat was incredible, radiating through his dark leather tunic. "Wolves rely entirely on scent. Yesterday you smelled like a dying, pathetic victim. Today you smell like an apex predator. You smell like the ancient kings of this land." "Torin is sitting over there," Lyra pointed out softly, looking at the large, black-bearded man a few seats away. "He called me an Iron Fang earlier. He wanted to kill me." "Torin is a simple man," Lucien said dismissively. "He respects pure power. If you walked over there right now and punched him in his teeth, he would probably thank you for it." Lyra actually laughed. It was a short, sharp sound, but it felt amazing. She hadn't laughed in months. "I'm not going to punch anyone tonight. I just want to finish this meat." "Good," Lucien said. His glowing silver eyes traced the side of her face, watching the way the firelight caught her hair. "Because tomorrow the real work starts. Today you found the door to the cage. Tomorrow you have to learn how to keep the damn door open without letting the monster burn this entire keep to the ground." They finished the meal. Lyra ate an unbelievable amount of food, completely cleaning the iron platter. Her stomach finally felt full and heavy. The deep exhaustion started to creep back into her bones, but it was a good tired. The kind of tired you feel after a hard day of work, not the sickening exhaustion of dying. "Walk with me," Lucien said suddenly. He stood up, towering over the table. Lyra grabbed one last piece of bread to chew on and followed him. They walked away from the loud, crowded hall, slipping through a small wooden door at the back of the room. It led to a narrow, spiraling stone staircase. They climbed up and up, the air getting colder with every step. Finally, Lucien pushed open a heavy iron door at the top. A blast of freezing, icy wind hit Lyra instantly. She shivered, pulling her dark fur vest tighter around her chest. They were standing on the high outer battlements of the stone keep. The view was absolutely incredible. They were up so high that she could see the entire valley stretching out below them. It was snowing. Thick, heavy white flakes fell silently from the dark night sky, covering the deep black mud of the courtyard far below and turning the thick forest around the keep into a bright white blanket. Lucien walked right up to the edge of the stone wall and rested his massive hands on the cold stone. The snow landed on his dark hair and his broad shoulders, but he didn't seem to feel the cold at all. Lyra walked up slowly and stood next to him. She looked out over the vast, dark trees. Somewhere out there, miles and miles away, was Stonekeep, Kaelin's territory. "Why do you hate him so much?" Lyra asked quietly. The cold wind carried her voice perfectly. "I know the Iron Fangs and the Blood Moons are enemies, But the way you talk about Kalen, it's personal, you want to destroy him. Lucian stared straight ahead into the falling snow. For a long time he didn't say anything. The only sound was the howling wind rushing over the high stone walls. My father built this sanctuary, Lucian finally said. His rough voice was very low, vibrating with a dark, heavy anger. He built it for the wolves that the other packs threw away. The runts, the crippled, the ones who wouldn't bow to cruel alphas. We were a peaceful pack. We didn't hunt on other people's lands. We just wanted to be left alone. Lyra watched the side of his hard face. The angry, faded scars on his cheek looked darker in the pale moonlight. Kalen's father was Alpha of the Ironfangs back then, Lucian continued. He hated us. He said we were a sickness in the territory. 10 years ago, when Kalen was just a young fighter trying to prove he was tough enough to be the next Alpha, he brought 50 of his best men here in the middle of the night. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. What did he do? Lucian turned his head and looked right down at her. His silver eyes were completely cold, filled with an ancient, unforgiving hate. He burned the old wooden keep to the ground while we were sleeping. He killed my father. He killed my mother. He slaughtered 40 wolves before we could even wake up and fight back. I was 18 years old. I had to drag Torin and Alara out of the burning fire. Lyra felt sick. A heavy, dark rock dropped into her stomach. She always knew Kalen was arrogant and cruel. He was a bully who liked to humiliate people, but she never knew he was a mass murderer. The Ironfang pack always told the story differently. They always said the Blood Moons attacked first. He's a monster, Lyra whispered. No, Lucian said firmly. He reached out and grabbed her chin with his large, calloused fingers. His touch was surprisingly gentle, but his grip was completely immovable. I am a monster. Kalen is just a coward who likes to set fires in the dark, and cowards always fall when they are forced to look a real monster right in the eyes. He let go of her chin and looked back out over the snowy valley. I rebuilt this keep with heavy stone so it can never burn again, Lucian said. I spent 10 years gathering the most violent, dangerous fighters I could find, but Kalen has 3 times as many wolves as I do. If I attack him directly, it will be a long, bloody war. Many of my people will die. So what is the plan? Lyra asked. Her heart was beating fast. She could feel the wild, ancient magic in her blood completely agreeing with Lucian's anger. She wanted to see Kalen fall just as badly as he did. Lucian turned fully toward her. He looked at her small human body, wrapped tightly in the dark fur, standing bravely in the freezing snow. The old laws, Lucian said. The Alpha challenge. If a wolf walks straight into an enemy keep and publicly challenges the Alpha to a fight to the death, the Alpha has to accept. If he refuses, his own pack is legally allowed to kill him for being a coward. Lyra's eyes went extremely wide. You want to challenge him? Lucian, Kalen is heavily guarded. Even if you kill him, his men will slaughter you right there in the courtyard. Lucian smiled that dark, wicked smile again. It made him look completely insane and incredibly handsome at the exact same time. I am not going to challenge him, Lyra. You are. Lyra stared at Lucian through the falling snow. She was completely sure she had misheard him. The howling wind was loud, and maybe her ears were just playing tricks on her. Me, Lyra asked. Her voice squeaked a little, completely ruining the tough image she was trying to build. You want me to challenge Kalen to a fight to the death? Yes, Lucian said plainly. He didn't even blink. You are the one he publicly rejected. You are the one he humiliated and threw into the mud. If I kill him, he dies a martyr to his people. They will just hate me more. But if you kill him, the weak, pathetic little mate he tossed away like garbage, it will completely destroy his legacy. His pack will bow to you. I don't want his pack, Lyra shouted, taking a step back. The freezing wind whipped her hair across her face. And I definitely don't want to die. Lucian, Kalen has been fighting since he could walk. He is an alpha. He knows how to kill. I shifted exactly 1 time and I passed out entirely naked in the dirt right after. Lucian stepped closer to her. He moved so fast that Lyra didn't even have time to back away again. He grabbed her entirely by the shoulders. His grip was completely hard, digging deep into her thick fur vest. Kalen is a normal wolf, Lucian growled, his face just inches from hers. He is a big dog with a big ego. You are an elder. You have the ancient blood of the first kings running hot in your veins. Your wolf is easily twice his size. Your jaws can snap his neck like a dry twig. But I don't know how to fight, Lyra argued, her heart hammering fast against her ribs. Then I will teach you, Lucian said, his silver eyes burning bright in the dark. I will beat you until your bones are made of iron. I will break you down and build you back up into a perfect weapon. I will teach you how to be a real monster, Lyra, because a monster is the only thing that can kill a cruel king." He didn't wait for her to agree. He simply let go of her shoulders, turned his broad back to her and walked away through the thick, falling snow toward the heavy iron door. Lyra stood there alone for a long minute, letting the freezing wind bite at her cheeks. She was terrified. She was completely, totally scared out of her mind. But deep down, underneath the human fear, the massive silver wolf inside her mind was pacing back and forth, hungry for blood. The brutal nightmare began the very next morning before the sun even came up. The sky was still totally black when Lucien kicked the heavy oak door of her bedroom completely open. He walked in holding a large wooden bucket filled to the brim with freezing cold water. He didn't say a single word. He just walked right up to the bed and threw the entire bucket of ice water directly onto Lyra's sleeping face. Lyra screamed loudly, shooting up from the thick bare furs. She gasped for air, completely shocked by the freezing cold. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" she yelled, wiping the icy water out of her stinging eyes. "Get up," Lucien said simply. He dropped the empty wooden bucket on the stone floor with a loud clatter. "You have exactly 2 minutes to put your boots on and get out to the training ring. If you are late, I am going to drag you out there by your hair." He walked out, leaving the door wide open. Lyra was shivering violently, her teeth chattering so hard they hurt. She wanted to crawl right back under the warm furs and tell him to go to hell, but she remembered the promise she made. She remembered Kaelin's cruel, laughing face. She jumped out of bed, threw on her dark leather pants and her heavy boots, and ran down the stone stairs as fast as she could. The training ring was covered in a fresh, thick layer of cold white snow. Lucien was already standing directly in the middle of it. He was completely shirtless again, the freezing morning air turning his breath into thick white clouds. He held 2 heavy wooden practice swords. He threw one right at Lyra as soon as she climbed over the rough wooden fence. She barely caught it. It was incredibly heavy, the wood thick and completely solid. "Hold it up," Lucien commanded. Lyra raised the wooden sword in front of her face. "Like this." Lucien didn't answer. He just swung his own sword as hard as he could. The heavy wood smashed directly into Lyra's ribs with a sickening crack. The pain was instantly blinding. Lyra dropped her sword and fell hard to her knees in the cold snow, wrapping her arms tightly around her stomach. She couldn't breathe. She tried to suck air into her empty lungs, but nothing happened. "Pick up the sword," Lucien said coldly, standing right above her. "You broke my ribs again," she choked out, tears of pure pain spilling hot down her freezing cheeks. "Your elder blood will heal it in a few hours," Lucien replied, totally uncaring. "Pick up the damn sword, Lyra. In a real fight, Kaelin is not going to wait for you to catch your breath. He is going to crush your skull while you are crying on your knees." Anger, hot and fast, suddenly exploded in her chest. She grabbed a huge handful of cold snow and threw it directly into Lucien's eyes. While he blinked in surprise, she grabbed her heavy wooden sword from the ground and swung it hard at his thick legs. Lucien easily stepped backward, dodging the messy swing. He let out a low, rough laugh. "Dirty tricks. Good, now get off your knees and try to actually hit me." For the next 4 hours he beat her entirely to a pulp. He hit her arms, her legs, her back. Every time she fell down, he forced her right back up. He didn't hold back at all. He showed her no mercy. By the time the grey sun finally rose high in the sky, Lyra was completely covered in dark purple bruises and deep, bleeding scrapes. Her entire body felt like it was on fire, but she refused to quit. She swung the heavy sword until her hands were totally blistered and bleeding. "Enough," Lucien finally called out, easily blocking her slow, exhausted swing and shoving her backward. "Go to Ilara, let her clean your cuts, eat a lot of meat, sleep, we do this again tonight." That was exactly how the next 3 weeks went. It was an endless, bloody, painful blur of pure violence. Lyra quickly stopped caring about being clean. She stopped caring about how she looked. Her soft hands turned completely hard, covered in thick, rough calluses. Her long hair was always tied back in a messy knot, completely full of dried dirt and old sweat. The heavy muscles in her arms and legs grew fast, fueled by the ancient elder magic inside her, and the massive amounts of roasted meat she ate every single day. They didn't just fight with wooden swords, they fought with bare hands. Lucien taught her how to punch directly through a man's guard, how to use her elbows to crush a nose, how to throw her entire body weight into a heavy strike. "You are too small to fight Kaelin with pure strength in your human form," Lucian explained one rainy afternoon. They were standing deep in the thick black mud of the courtyard. The rest of the pack was watching them closely from the dry edges, totally silent. You have to be faster, you have to be meaner, you have to aim for the soft spots. Eyes, throat, knees. He threw a fast, heavy punch right at her face. Lyra ducked quickly under his massive arm, spun around behind him, and kicked the back of his knee as hard as she possibly could. Lucian's leg buckled totally, and he dropped down into the wet mud. Before he could get back up, Lyra jumped directly onto his broad back. She wrapped one arm tight around his thick neck and pulled back hard, choking him. Lucian didn't panic. He just reached back with one massive hand, grabbed her by her thick leather belt, and completely flipped her right over his own head. Lyra flew through the wet air and slammed onto her back in the deep mud. All the air left her lungs in a loud rush. Lucian sat up slowly, wiping the dirty black mud off his scarred face. He was breathing heavily, but he was smiling. "Better," he grunted out. "You actually made me try that time." "Fuck you," Lyra groaned loudly, completely refusing to move from the comfortable, cold mud. They also trained in their wolf forms. This was the hardest part. The shift was always extremely painful, a violent tearing of bone and muscle, but Lyra got faster at it. Her silver wolf was absolutely massive, a terrifying ancient beast that completely dwarfed every other wolf in the Blood Moon pack. The only wolf that came close to her size was Lucian. His wolf was pure pitch black, covered in thick, heavy battle scars. When they fought in the deep forest, it sounded like two massive mountains crashing together. They tore up huge, ancient trees by their roots. They bit and scratched and roared until the entire valley shook with the terrible noise. Lyra had to learn how to control the wild, pure rage of the elder blood. If she let the anger take over completely, she became totally mindless, and Lucian would easily pin her to the ground by her silver throat. She had to learn how to think while she was trying to kill. On the night of the third week, the weather finally broke. The heavy snow stopped completely, leaving the sky totally clear and full of bright, cold stars. The moon was almost full, casting a bright silver light over the quiet stone courtyard. Lyra was standing in the training ring alone, throwing heavy punches at a thick wooden post wrapped in old animal skins. Her knuckles were entirely wrapped in dirty white cloth, spotted with old, dark blood. She was breathing hard, sweat running down her face despite the freezing night air. "You are hitting it too high," a deep voice said from the shadows. Lyra stopped and turned around. Lucian walked slowly out of the dark. He was wearing his usual dark leather pants, completely barefoot in the freezing snow. He stepped easily over the wooden fence and walked up behind her. "Kaelin is taller than you," Lucian murmured, standing so incredibly close that his broad chest almost touched her back. "If you punch high, you leave your ribs totally open. He will break them with one single hit." He reached his large, calloused hands out and gently grabbed her wrists. He slowly lowered her hands a few inches. His touch was burning hot against her cold, sweaty skin. Lyra held her breath perfectly still. For weeks they had been doing nothing but trying to beat each other senseless. But right now, in the quiet, silver moonlight, the heavy tension between them suddenly shifted. It wasn't angry anymore. It was deep, heavy, and extremely dangerous in a completely different way. "Punch lower," Lucian whispered right next to her ear. His deep voice rumbled straight down her spine. "Break his center of gravity, then you take his head." Lyra swallowed hard. She turned her head slightly to look at him. His face was only inches from hers. She could see the faint silver glow deep inside his dark eyes. She could smell the pine needles and the sharp, clean scent of his skin. "I'm ready," Lyra said. Her voice was very low, slightly raspy from yelling all day. Lucian slowly let go of her wrists. He took one single step around her, standing directly in front of her. He looked down into her eyes for a long, quiet minute. He reached up and slowly brushed a dirty strand of silver blonde hair out of her eyes. His rough thumb traced the line of her cheekbone. "Yes," Lucian finally said. "You are ready. The weak little stray is completely dead. You are a weapon now." Lyra didn't look away from him. "You built me." "No," Lucian corrected softly, his hand dropping to rest heavy on her waist. "I just helped you tear the cage open. You built yourself. And tomorrow night, when the moon is perfectly full, we are going to march straight to the gates of Stonekeep." Lyra felt a massive, cold spike of adrenaline hit her heart. Tomorrow, it was finally happening. Tomorrow she would see Kaelin again. Tomorrow she would stand right in front of the entire Ironfang pack and demand the ancient Alpha challenge. "He is not going to accept the challenge," Lyra pointed out, trying to ignore how distracting Lucian's heavy hand on her waist felt. He will just tell his guards to shoot us with silver arrows from the high walls. Lucian smiled, showing his teeth in the bright moonlight. He won't have a choice. I am bringing all 200 of my best fighters. If he refuses the challenge, we will completely tear his gates down and slaughter every single wolf who tries to protect him. He has to fight you, or he looks like a coward in front of his entire kingdom. Lyra nodded slowly. And if I lose? Lucian grabbed the back of her neck tightly, pulling her completely flush against his hard, massive chest. He looked intensely down at her lips, then back up to her wide eyes. You will not lose, Lucian promised, his voice totally rough and full of absolute certainty. Because if you die, I will burn the entire Ironfang territory to the ground, and you don't want all that innocent blood on your hands, do you? The sun did not shine the next morning. The sky was a thick, heavy grey, hanging extremely low over the Blood Moon stronghold. The wind howled against the thick stone walls, rattling the heavy wooden shutters. Lyra sat perfectly still on the edge of her bed. She had not slept a single wink. She just stared at her calloused, bruised hands, listening to the loud, busy noises coming from the courtyard far below. Men were shouting. Heavy iron swords were hitting grinding stones. The pack was getting ready for a war. The heavy oak door to her room creaked open. Ilara walked in. The old healer was not carrying a wooden tray of food this time. She was carrying a heavy pile of dark leather and iron. She dropped it directly onto the bed next to Lyra with a loud, metallic clatter. Put it on, Ilara ordered, crossing her arms. Her face was totally hard and serious. Lyra reached out and touched the cold iron rings sewn into the thick black leather. It was a chest piece designed to protect the heart and the lungs. Where did you get this? She asked. It's small. It looks like it was made for a woman. It was, Ilara said bluntly. It belonged to a female fighter named Kalia. She was fast and incredibly mean. A huge Ironfang guard cut her head completely off 8 years ago during a border fight. She doesn't need the armor anymore. Lyra swallowed hard. She pulled her soft grey shirt over her head and picked up the heavy leather vest. It smelled like old iron, sweat and dried blood. She slipped it over her shoulders. It was incredibly heavy, pressing down hard on her collarbones, but it fit her body perfectly. There were thick leather straps on the sides. Lyra tried to pull them tight, but her fingers were shaking too much. Stop acting like a scared rabbit, Ilara snapped. She stepped forward, slapped Lyra's hands away, and yanked the thick leather straps extremely tight. I'm not scared, Lyra lied, wincing as the stiff leather dug hard into her sides. Bullshit, Ilara said, moving to the other side to pull the next strap. You are terrified. I can smell the sour sweat on your skin from all the way across the room. You are about to walk into the biggest, most dangerous pack in the region and ask their alpha to fight you to the death. If you weren't completely scared out of your mind, I would think you were stupid. He's going to kill me, Lyra whispered. The heavy reality of the day was finally crushing her chest. Ilara, he has been fighting his whole life. I just learned how to throw a real punch 3 weeks ago. Ilara stopped pulling the straps. She stepped back and looked Lyra right in the eyes. You are not a normal wolf anymore. You are an elder. Your blood is pure magic and pure violence. When you shift tonight under the full moon, you will be twice his size. But none of that matters if your human mind gives up before the fight even starts. The old woman reached out and poked Lyra hard right in the center of her iron-covered chest. If you walk in there acting like a victim, you will die a victim. You have to walk in there like a queen who is coming to take her stolen crown back. Lyra took a deep, shaking breath. She nodded slowly. Okay. Good, Ilara grunted, turning toward the door. Now put your boots on and get downstairs. The alpha is waiting. When Lyra finally walked out into the freezing courtyard, the sight made her stop dead in her tracks. 200 wolves were standing in perfect, completely silent lines in the dirty black slush. They were all wearing thick animal furs, heavy leather armor and dark iron helmets. They held massive battle axes, long broadswords and thick wooden shields banded with rough steel. They looked like a nightmare army. The smell of wet dog, sharp iron and hungry bloodlust was so incredibly thick in the cold air that Lyra could almost taste it on her tongue. Lucian stood on the raised wooden platform at the very front. He was wearing full battle armor. Thick, overlapping plates of dark, unpolished iron covered his massive chest and broad shoulders. A giant, heavy black wolf pelt was draped over his back, fastened with a silver chain. His giant broadsword was strapped tightly to his back. He looked absolutely terrifying. He looked like a god of war. He saw Lyra step out of the heavy wooden doors, his glowing silver eyes locked onto her. He didn't smile, he didn't say a word, he just gave her a short, slow nod of pure respect. Lucian turned his massive body to face his army. "Listen to me," he roared. His deep, rough voice echoed loudly off the high stone walls. "Tonight the moon is full, tonight we march to the gates of Stonekeep." A low, dark rumble of pure anger moved through the 200 wolves. They hated the Ironfang pack. They had waited 10 long years for this exact moment. "We are not going there to start a blind war," Lucian continued, his voice cutting easily through the freezing wind. "We are going there to enforce the old laws. Lyra is going to challenge Alpha Kalen to the death." A few wolves shifted nervously in the slush. They looked at Lyra. She was still small compared to them. She didn't look like a killer. "If Kalen fights her, we do not interfere," Lucian commanded loudly, staring down at his men with completely cold eyes. "It is a sacred duel, but—" He paused, his jaw tightening hard. "If Kalen refuses, if he tells his men to shoot a single arrow, if anyone from the Ironfang pack tries to touch her, you will tear their gates completely down. You will flood into their courtyard and you will kill every single wolf who stands in your way. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Alpha," the entire pack roared back. The deafening sound shook the dirt right under Lyra's boots. Torin, the huge man with the black beard, stepped out of the line. He walked straight over to Lyra. He was holding a short, wickedly sharp iron sword with a thick leather handle. He stopped right in front of her and held it out. "You don't have a weapon," Torin grunted, his dark eyes looking down at her. "Take this. If that arrogant bastard Kalen tries to cheat before you shift, stab him right in his damn throat." Lyra looked at the heavy sword, then up at Torin's scarred face. He was the man who had wanted to kill her on her very first day here. Now he was handing her a blade to protect herself. She reached out and grabbed the cold leather handle. "Thank you, Torin." Torin gave her a slow nod and stepped back into the line. "Open the gates," Lucian shouted. The heavy iron chains clanked loudly as 4 massive wolves pulled the giant wooden gates open. The dark, snowy forest waited for them outside. Lucian jumped down from the platform and walked right up to Lyra. "Stay close to me," he said quietly so the rest of the pack couldn't hear. "The march will take 5 hours. Save your energy, don't speak unless you have to." "I'm ready," Lyra said, gripping the handle of her new sword tightly. They walked out of the sanctuary. The army of 200 wolves followed closely behind them, their heavy boots crunching loudly in the freezing, deep snow. The journey through the dark woods was absolutely brutal. The wind howled through the bare, dead branches of the tall trees, throwing sharp, stinging ice directly into their faces. Lyra pulled the thick hood of her fur cloak up, trying to keep the biting cold out of her ears. The heavy iron armor pressed painfully into her chest with every single step she took. Her legs started to burn after the first 2 hours, but she absolutely refused to slow down. She forced herself to match Lucian's long, heavy strides. As they walked deeper and deeper into the forest, the sun slowly began to set. The grey sky turned a deep, bruising purple, and then finally faded into complete pitch black. Then the moon rose. It was completely huge, perfectly round and blindingly silver. It hung heavily over the dark trees, casting long, spooky shadows across the white snow. The exact second the pure moonlight hit Lyra's skin, her entire body seized up. A hot, incredibly violent shockwave of pure energy slammed directly into her chest. She gasped out loud, stumbling forward. Her inner wolf woke up instantly. The ancient, massive beast clawed wildly at the inside of her mind, begging to be let out. It smelled the full moon. It wanted to hunt. It wanted to kill. Lucian's massive hand grabbed her arm tight, keeping her from falling face first into the snow. "Fight it," he ordered in a low, rough growl. "Hold the shift back. You have to wait until we are inside the gates." Lyra squeezed her eyes tightly shut. Her bones ached horribly, desperate to break and reform into her massive silver wolf. She forced herself to breathe slowly, pushing the wild, angry magic deep down into her stomach. "It's so strong tonight," she choked out, her entire body shaking violently. "It hurts." "I know," Lucian said, his grip on her arm staying completely firm and warm. "Use the pain, let it make you angry." They kept walking. The silence of the huge army behind them was terrifying. 200 massive killers moving through the dark woods, making almost no sound at all except for the steady crunching of the snow. They were a shadow moving toward a war. Finally, after hours of endless, freezing walking, the thick trees began to thin out. The smell in the air changed. The clean scent of pine and snow was replaced by the heavy smell of wood smoke, roasted meat, and unwashed bodies. "We are here," Lucian said quietly, stopping right at the edge of the tree line. Lyra stepped up beside him and looked out. Stonekeep sat in the middle of a massive, cleared valley. It was totally huge, completely surrounded by high, thick walls made of pale grey stone. Huge iron buckets filled with burning oil hung from the top of the walls, casting a bright, dancing orange light over the deep snow. Lyra's heart started to hammer incredibly fast against her ribs. This was her home. This was the place where she was born, where she was raised to be quiet and small. This was the exact courtyard where Kaelin had kicked her in the ribs and ordered his men to throw her in the garbage. "Look at the walls," Torin whispered from right behind them. Lyra looked up. The top of the stone wall was completely packed with Ironfang guards. They were pacing back and forth, holding long wooden bows and sharp spears. They had totally seen the massive Blood Moon army waiting in the dark trees. Panic was starting to spread fast. Men were shouting loudly, pointing down at the tree line. "They know we are here," Lucian said, a dark, wicked smile spreading across his rough face. He reached over his massive shoulder and pulled his giant broadsword out of its leather sheath. The steel made a loud, sharp ringing sound in the quiet night. "Let's go knock on the front door." Lucian stepped completely out of the dark shadows of the trees and walked right into the bright orange light of the burning oil. He didn't try to hide. He walked slowly, proudly, his heavy iron boots hitting the frozen ground hard. Lyra took a deep breath, gripped her short sword, and followed right beside him. The 200 Blood Moon wolves marched entirely out of the woods behind them, spreading out into a massive, terrifying line of dark armor and sharp steel. They stopped exactly 50 feet away from the giant, locked wooden gates of Stonekeep. "Halt!" a loud, shaking voice yelled from the top of the high wall. A man in silver armor leaned over the edge, aiming a heavy crossbow directly at Lucian's chest. "You are trespassing on Ironfang land. Take your wild dogs and turn around right now, Lucian, or we will shoot you completely dead." Lucian didn't even flinch. He just looked up at the guard and let out a loud, mocking laugh. "You couldn't kill me if I stood here and let you try, you stupid little boy," he roared back. "I mean it," the guard yelled, his voice cracking badly with pure fear. "We have 50 archers aiming right at your head. Leave now." "I did not come here to sneak into your house in the dark and burn it down," Lucian shouted, making sure every single wolf inside the walls could hear his booming voice. "I am not a coward like your alpha. I came here under the protection of the old laws. I demand the alpha challenge." A heavy, shocked silence completely fell over the walls. The guards looked at each other in total confusion. The alpha challenge was an ancient rule. It hadn't been used in over 100 years. By law, if a challenger came to the gates, the reigning alpha had to open the doors and face them in a fair fight to the death. "You," the guard yelled down, sounding very unsure now, "you want to challenge Alpha Kaelin?" "No," Lucian yelled back. He stepped to the side and roughly grabbed Lyra by the shoulder, pulling her forward so the bright firelight hit her face perfectly. "She does." Lyra stood perfectly straight. She reached up with her cold, shaking hand and pushed the heavy fur hood completely off her head. Her bright silver blonde hair blew wildly in the freezing wind. She looked directly up at the men on the wall. One of the older guards dropped his wooden bow right over the edge. It hit the snowy ground below with a loud clatter. "Holy shit," the man gasped out loudly. "It's the dead stray, it's Lyra." The whispering started instantly. It spread like hot wildfire along the top of the wall. "She's alive," someone muttered. "How is she alive? The sickness should have killed her in a day. Look at her eyes, she looks completely different." "Go get your alpha," Lyra suddenly screamed. She didn't even know where the huge, booming voice came from. Her ancient wolf was pushing the words right up her throat, making her voice sound deep and completely terrifying. "Tell Kaelin to bring his arrogant ass out here right now, or we will break these fucking gates down and I will drag him out by his hair." More shocked silence. Then, deep inside the massive courtyard of Stonekeep, a heavy bell started to ring loudly. "He's coming," Lucian murmured quietly, stepping close to Lyra's side. "Get ready, little wolf. The cage is completely open now." Lyra stared at the giant wooden doors. Her heart stopped beating fast and suddenly slowed down to a heavy, powerful rhythm. The fear was completely gone. The only thing left in her chest was pure, hot, violent anger. She wanted blood. The heavy iron chains on the other side of the wall rattled violently. The massive wooden beams groaned out loud. Slowly, the giant gates of Stonekeep began to swing open into the dark night.